Hi, class. We're on chapter 18, the last chapter. Yay! Pricing for international markets. Let's go over this. I have about 41 slides, and I'm going to touch on the most important items as far as pricing. As you know, we've gone over all of the other P's: product or service, promotion in international markets, and place, which is distribution. All of those are very important, just as price is very important. And I'm going to go over why it is important in international markets and why we can see there's a big difference between pricing in domestic markets versus foreign markets. First of all, we have to look at the variables that are impacting price. And we can define price. I put it over here on the side as an offerings price. So the product or services price, it has to reflect the quality and value that the consumer, wherever they may live, perceives in the product. Okay, so again, we look at the product, which is the heart of the 4Ps, the heart of the marketing mix. And that product or service has to have the quality and value assigned to it. And then we can look at pricing. But there are a lot of other things that go into pricing, especially when we're taking a product into another country. So tariffs, number one. And this is going to be a big concern under Trump because he is claiming to enact tariffs, friends and foes, it doesn't matter. We're going to see a lot more tariffs, which is going to add to the price of products and services because it's going to be passed down to the customer. So the actual cost to produce that product or service, attitudes toward pricing, it depends on the kind of market you're in. If people are really pinching pennies, or if they can afford more for that product or service. Competition is always very important with pricing. Probably one of the most important things I would say is how much are the competitors charging, because you either want to be at the market, above market, or below market when you're pricing. And that's something I'd like to see in your marketing plan. How do you propose to structure your pricing strategy? Are you at the market with everybody else, the competition, or are you below market so you can beat the competition? That runs into cost here. You have to realize what your costs are, cost plus cost-based pricing. Or are you going to be above market? And if you're above market value or pricing, then you're seen as higher quality. A price quality relationship is important, but that doesn't work in every market, as you can well imagine. Some markets, they just cannot afford that higher quality. And we're going to take a look at that. Currency fluctuations are important. Consider any market and look at what their currency is. I'm taking a group of students to Scandinavia, and we're looking at the currency there, and it's pretty close to the US. The last time I was there, it was a lot higher to go there and to pay for products or food or any hotels, anything there. The currency, how much does a dollar buy in other countries has to be taken into consideration. The method of price quotation, is it a negotiation in a country, or is it a set price and you pay it, as in the United States? And how are they making payments? Method of payment. We're going to look at that and how you actually pay or have people pay for it. Because if it's on credit, people might spend a little bit more. If it's cash, you might not have that fee of the credit card, so you can lower your prices. See what I'm saying? There's so many variables impacting price. Let's look at culture. that could impact it. High power cultures high in power distance, meaning customers are less price sensitive. And then it could also be a country in which the business is being conducted. Pricing could be affected by that. If it's a poor, underdeveloped, or developing country, the type of product it is, if it's needed or if it's not necessarily needed, it's wanted. Competitive conditions, as I mentioned, and then tax rates could affect pricing because that's going to push the price up again. Parallel imports. This is really interesting. Looking at as the gray market, not a black market, but a gray market. And this is not really legal if in the US, but products are sold to a developing country or even from the US to Canada could be sold for a discounted price. And you see this a lot with medications, with pharmaceuticals. The product is exported illegally to other countries for the same price. So in this case, people would go to Canada or Mexico and try and get the product at a cheaper price, bring it back in and sell it and make a profit on it. So we're seeing this, it not something you want to do. Exclusive distribution. This happens when the company wants to make sure the retailers are paying a lot of attention to their product, and they only let certain people distribute their product or service. And when you do that, typically it's a higher priced item. Cost and market considerations. We have to take into account, obviously, how much things are costing to produce, how much will the market accept or bear on that. Strategic pricing, country to country, we really have to consider what is the best method for doing this, and having stability for operations is important, and perceptions of pricing vary culturally by country to country, and how people feel about how much they're paying for goods and the type of goods. Okay. Full cost pricing. Companies do this. It just, there's no unit of similar product is different in cost from others. Each has a full share of the total fixed cost, meaning, I mean, you've had accounting probably by now, but fixed cost are things they cannot change in the pricing, and variable cost will change depending on how the quantity that are produced. This works when it's a high variable cost relative to the fixed cost. So we're not going to get too much into this one. Don't worry too much. Variable cost, just meaning firms are really concerned only with marginally, and the more they produce, the lower the variable cost will go. Price skimming. This is a marketing strategy that you might want to think about, because if there is no similar product in that market, then you can go into that market, or if it's brand new, or if it's really innovative, you can go into a market and charge a higher price and skim off more profit and pay for that, maybe research and development, or just eventually your prices are going to have to go down. But skimming is used in markets all the time, but it has to be something that is new or innovative. Penetration pricing is also a pricing strategy you could consider in a foreign market. And this means going into a country with lower prices, beating the competition and gaining market share, so that you take away business from another company but eventually, most companies don't stay at that penetration price. They grab their market share and then inch back up and up to cover costs. This is something I would like to have you consider for your final project. Now, if I see something similar to this in your final project, I will know that you watched this. And we're going to talk about this when we're together, but you have to come up with a pricing objective in your final project. When you get to the 4Ps or the marketing mix, I'm going to expect you to say, okay, is my marketing objective profit oriented, sales oriented, or status quo? So if I want to make a profit, I have to consider the target return. How much return do I want? And am I going to maximize profits? If this is your strategy, explain this to me. Or you can have a strategy of sales oriented. So your sales, you want your sales to grow, you want to grow your market share. This is a strategy here. Okay. Status quo is when you're kind of worried about going into a market and how you're pricing, and you just want to survive. You want stability. So you're going to meet the competition and you're going to have non-price competition here. So you're not too worried about growing, but you want to make sure you survive. So I want to see in your final project one of these 3 objectives and then explain all of these. Okay. If you have questions, we'll go over it. Okay. This is interesting where Walmart went into China. Now they have over 400 stores and wholesale operations, and that low price, good quality, debatable, is really working in China. All right, one of the things you have to consider is if you're going to export, this obviously is going to add to the price. Okay. You're going to pay shipping costs, you're going to pay tariffs, you're going to have insurance and security and financing costs and taxes, and all of these things have to go into pricing. How much is it going to cost me? I looked at one study one time of a Jeep that we could manufacture in the US for about $16,000. Of course, a Jeep does not isn't priced at that in the US. Of course, they want to make their profit and pay for a lot of things, but to actually the same Jeep going overseas is going to be something like double that, like $30,000. And that's just your base price because of all of these things going into it. You're going to pay taxes, tariffs, and administrative costs. You're going to have people help you with the exporting of products and services. This is interesting, a Japanese wholesale. I don't understand this because I thought Japanese beef was some of the best in the world, but apparently they import from Australia, and the cost to do so is very high. Tariffs are one of the main causes for this imported product, and it's going to get worse. Inflation is another problem. Rapid inflation, exchange variation. The selling price has to be related to the cost of goods sold and the cost of replacing the items. Deflation, general costs are low in a market. Deflation is when a company or usually a government is trying to bring prices down. In Japan, we saw that happening. I think it's important and interesting that they use Japan more in this chapter. Exchange rates, currency values, these are all things that could make a price higher and higher, go up and up. And I'm not going to go over all of these. I did talk to you a little bit about it, but transportation costs, depending on how you distribute or transport your product, that has to go into your pricing. So if you have flowers that have to be sent by air, that's going to be much more expensive than having a container on a slow boat getting to the United States or leaving the US. So those transportation costs and getting them to that that area, which are intermediaries, that's going to be expensive as well. Let's go over lowering tariffs. That is not going to happen, but some countries may lower tariffs, or they can change their classification of what their product is. And we've seen China do this a number of times. They don't want to pay the tariff, so they reclassify their product, and then the tariffs go down. But I think that's going to be called under inspection more and more. Lowering distribution costs, I don't see that happening anytime soon, but this could reduce the price escalation. And then just selling within the foreign trade zones, the free trade zones, could help you reduce the price. Dumping is another interesting concept that you should be aware of. You cannot sell at a price below your cost of production. If you sell in foreign markets below the price of the same good in the home market, that's called dumping, and that is illegal. Leasing could help you lower costs in some markets, and that's just not going over there and creating a whole infrastructure for your business, but leasing equipment, leasing facilities, or just merging or working with other companies could help you lower your costs. There are problems with that as well. We won't go over that. Counter trade as a pricing tool. I put the definition here: a type of transaction in which goods are imported and sold by a company from another country in exchange for the right or ability to manufacture and or sell goods in that country. So what they're doing, they really want to manufacture or sell goods in that country. So they're going to just make concessions. It's kind of like a bartering system. I give you something, you give me something. It's a pricing tool that could be used. There are problems with that as well. I'm not going to go over all of that because I don't see that as a concern for your final project in any way. But quoting prices, this is really important, and I hope this shows up in your final project as well, is who's responsible for all of these things, transporting, and who pays the tariffs. And sometimes it's not clear. Sometimes companies assume things about who's paying what, and in the end it puts them out of business. Credit terms and financing, so you really need to know everything that's going into your pricing and who's paying for what in this way. Administering prices, it's an attempt to establish prices for an entire market. We don't see that really happening that much. Government influence pricing, we do see this where the government will establish margins, and they're going to set prices, the floor and the ceiling, like this is how much you can charge, this is as much as you can charge, this is as low as you can charge. And they really restrict the changes in pricing and look at the competition in the market. And sometimes the government will grant subsidies and help businesses do business in other countries. So the government does influence pricing in many ways, and sometimes businesses don't take advantage of it and they're not aware of it. So working with agencies who could help with your pricing agreements is really important. In China, I thought this was interesting that the government controls pricing, so there's no reason to set it otherwise. You can't really do anything other than what the government says. Getting paid. You have to be aware of how you're gonna get paid in markets, for if you're exporting a whole, um, batch or, thousands and thousands, or do you have a letter of credit? Are you gonna get paid in advance? Do you have open accounts, which is for long-standing customers usually, and you have to have good credit reputations for that. Letters of credit are really important, so you have to have good credit ratings when you're gonna go into other markets and have people who are gonna back you and support you, and, um, don't do it on your own. Um, I don't know that we need to go over this letter of credit transaction, but that's it for the pricing chapter, and that's it for the book. So thank you so much for hanging in there, and I look forward to going over your final project with you.